Welcome back to another episode of That's Business. Today's guest, Kimberly, is going to tell us how she managed to get out of $50,000 in debt, amongst other things, of course. But Kimberly, thank you so much for being here. I so anxiously just want to ask you that story. But before we dive into all the greatness that is you, did you always want to be a financial coach, or what was your childhood like? What did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, I wanted to be a veterinarian when I was growing up. Yeah, from a very young age. Oh my gosh, you're taking me back. But I got to Michigan State and I was like, oh, I'm not smart enough for this. It's just like, and be like super smart. So I was like, nah, I don't want to do that. I can't do that. So I ended up actually being a teacher, high school biology and chemistry teacher.
Wow.
Also very hard.
Yeah, I was like, do you not have to be smart to do that? Because I couldn't do that.
You do. Maybe I was just afraid of being rejected by vet school.
Ooh,
I think probably, fear plays a big role in what you go for, I think, in college. Yep. But anyway, blah, blah, blah. I ended up in insurance, and nobody is like, well, I want to be an insurance agent when I grow up. No one says that in insurance. But I found my own little niche because I really, really enjoyed educating people on how insurance worked, because it's such if you have a really bad insurance claim, that policy really can ruin your life or make a really bad situation not as bad. And so I would never quote unquote sell. I would just simply explain how the coverages worked, and then they could purchase what they felt like was important for their situation. And I would always say, but what about this? Help them along. So I used teaching throughout, but I never really taught high school because I could not make children sit in their seats. So the whole classroom discipline was not my forte. So I like sticking to adults, and still very passionate about teaching. It is one of my, what I would call my sparky skills, Marie Kondo, this,
yes.
If it sparks joy, with the whole, love that lady. She's so awesome. But anyway, I stole her little sparky part. And I think that people should focus on their sparky skills. What gives them joy and what gives other people joy when they're using them. And so teaching definitely does that for me.
I like that, sparky skills. I'm going to steal that. When you see that on my career coaching, I'll give you credit, because it's so true.
Okay. Give Marie Kondo credit, because I stole it from her.
It's okay. And it's so interesting you bring that up, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like growing up, it's like you could do whatever you want and everything's great. And then you actually get into high school, get into college, get into post-college or post-high school, whatever that looks like for you. Then it's like, no, you're going to stay in your job and you're going to do this with, look at the benefits, look at all these things, and don't be crazy. Don't start your own company, or don't do this that has nothing to do with what you did before. So
yeah, exactly.
I love that. And a lot of the conversations I have in career coaching are, I start with what do you like to do? What hobbies do you have?
Right.
You're like, I don't know what hobbies. I'm like, it's not a right or wrong question. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bring up the PTSD to ask you what you like. Gosh.
I almost wonder if people are afraid to do what they enjoy.
Yes.
Sometimes. I think so. It can be scary to do what you enjoy.
It's terrifying. It's also terrifying to be miserable in your job every day, too.
It's terrifying.
Which is the better one. But the one big thing I, of course, being an entrepreneur, and that we have a lot of creativity, of course, as you know, in Michigan and Metro Detroit. But
yeah,
I think I was just having this conversation maybe with my partner, and I was like, why do people hate on artistic skill sets? My friends that are artists make the most money,
right?
Artists, photographers. I'm like, why did we hate on this growing up? That's so smart.
Let's just talk about, we need artists in our life. As an American society, we are losing our valuation of the artistic realm. And I just think that is such a huge mistake. I think we need that just as much as you need math or science. If you really want to play that kind of dichotomy, I don't think you need to.
Right.
I think there's beauty in art in math and science, but we need a liberal arts. I think we do, to balance out all of the people in their heads in that way.
Exactly. Now, I don't remember the timeline here, but you graduate college and you get into teaching.
Yep. And then promptly got out. Love all teachers. Any teachers out there, love you, love you. Can't do it.
Yes. Not my thing. So where do we get to 2010 when you found yourself in debt, or what was that transitional period and what happened during that, if you feel comfortable sharing?
Oh, I feel comfortable. I'm an open book, Angela. Come on now.
That's why we got along and talked for 2 hours the first time we met.
I think so. So when I discovered that my sparky skills was not in classroom discipline, but I enjoyed teaching, I read that infamous book, What Color is Your Parachute? Right? And tried to go back and figure out like really what would bring me the most joy. So going through that whole process, I wanted to do field biology. So I ended up being a spotted owl researcher in New Mexico.
What?
And oh yeah, dude, I can hoot like an owl, like for sure. I'm not going to do it on this recording because I don't think I'm prepared for it. I wasn't thinking about telling you about this. So we'll see if I can get up the nerve to do it later. Blah, blah, blah. I loved it. I was in a tent for a whole field season, which was like March, April, all the way until August. And it was so much fun. But field work is very sporadic. And basically, you eventually have to get like a master's and a PhD and just go into research if that's what you wanted to do. And I did want to be, closer to my family. So I came back from that, and a friend of mine was like, hey, do you want to file at the insurance agency I work for? And I was like, yeah, I need a job. I need a job. I can't be living with my parents forever.
Right.
And so one thing led to another, and I became an insurance agent, and I resisted for very, very long. I was like, no, I'm just going to do the customer service thing. I'm not going to become an agent. But I did find that I liked it. It kind of itched the teaching side because I enjoyed teaching about something that was just very important to understand in real terms, like the choices that they're making. So I really like that part. And I also really like the part of when claims were not going well and defending the client. I'm like, no, they have this coverage, blah, blah, blah. Like, we need to work this out because they have it. So I really like that part too, making sure that people got what they paid for. So I did that for a number of years. But during that time, I started to get out of debt. So it was a coworker who told me about Dave Ramsey and Financial Peace University, and I took it in 2008 and flunked. I flunked out because
love that.
I had gotten out of insurance for like 6 or 8 months during that time. Well, actually, I guess it was like a year because my father passed away in 2008, and I was like, who becomes an insurance agent? No one does. I need to go back to do something in teaching. This is ridiculous. I did not get a college degree to be an insurance agent. Can you tell I was very resistant insurance agent?
Yeah, something like that.
So I left insurance, and I left it at the exact wrong time because I was laid off I worked for a third-party retailer for smart boards and sold those for a hot minute. And they laid me off. And so in 2008, I found myself no job, on unemployment, and renting rooms out of my house and living in my basement to survive the Great Recession. So FPU, the first time I took it, happened right when I was laid off. And so I was like, I can't do this. I got to live on credit cards. How am I going to? There's no way to get out of debt at this point. I mean, that's ridiculous. So I promptly went into a bunch more debt during that Great Recession. And when I finally got back to working full time, I went back to insurance. I went back to the agency that I had left in 2008. Weird circumstances how I got back there. But anyway, got back there and I was like, okay, this is it. I'm just going to be an insurance agent. This is what God has for me in my life. I'm going to be an insurance agent. And I sat down one March and I finally got the nerve up to look at what the damage was from being, through the Great Recession and putting a lot of stuff on credit cards, and found myself nearly $50,000 in debt. And actually, the emotions that happened is I was pissed because I looked at all of the money that was going out towards debt, and it was way over half of the amount of money I received from income was going out for debt. And I was like, this is out of control. This is crazy. So when I started, also, when you have that level of debt or even more today, because that was back in 2010. So now you apply inflation to that number and it's a lot more, right? People have way more today. And that is so completely stressful. So my first goal was just to feel more in control of my money, to feel like I knew what was coming in and what was going out. And that, was the first relief that I felt. It wasn't until probably about halfway through that, you just keep doing the same stuff that I was like, oh, this is actually working. And what it was shocking about that is because I was still an insurance agent, part of my pay was commissions based on your sales. So I found that when you have your personal life income and expenses under control, your financial personal life under control, it shockingly makes it easier to, in the insurance world, sell or do your job. So that's one thing that I've seen repeated over and over with all of my clients. They will naturally start earning more money. They get raises because once you get that personal life and you get that confidence under control and you're not thinking about it all day, you're thinking about it maybe 1 or 2 minutes in the morning while you're looking at your transactions. Yep, I'm on track. Then you can focus fully on work. And that just totally changes how much income you can bring in.
It does. So you are your own best testimonial, of course. But after all this happened, so when did you decide to try the schooling again, go after it, and how you got to where you are today?
So along the way, I knew that I needed people alongside me to make the habit changes for money. So you can't do it alone, basically. So I met my now husband, and, we are definitely, when it comes to money stuff, we are definitely each other's opposites. My husband is a saver. I am a spender. I would say I'm more of the budgeting geek. He's more like, I just won't spend. That's my approach to budgeting. I just am not going to spend.
Fair.
So these two types of people need to come together. And how he helped me was, and before we ever got married, he would be like, Kim, why are you spending? This was back in the day, right? On Blackberries. Ooh. Why are you spending $120 on this Blackberry? And I'm like, I need it. He's like, but do you?
Yeah.
I'm like, he's like, can't you find a better rate? And I'm like, okay. So that accountability, someone who was on my side, but was helping me like check my financial decisions, really helped. And that was when I started to be like, okay, I think I can actually get out of this debt. And then that led me to teaching or coordinating. They don't call it teaching, coordinating financial peace classes. And I did those at my church. And I think I've done 10 or 11 now today. But one thing that I noticed was that after the first class, people would repeat the class over and over and over. So what they were having troubles doing, not everyone, but a good enough amount. So financial peace is kind of like the theory of how to handle your money. And then they needed somebody to help them apply that theory to their own personal financial situation. And the things that come up that don't quite fit the perfect mold and direction how to do that. So when I left insurance, I sold my book of business. I was like, I would like to do financial coaching. So I became a Ramsey Master Coach and then, started coaching. So one of that, I was like, I need some victims to work on. So
right.
the best place to get some victims to help is volunteering.
Yeah.
So I just Googled like homelessness, I think like personal finance, classing or budgeting or something like that. Anyway, I ran into St. Vincent de Paul, Detroit, and a special work of them is called Journey to Housing. And I just emailed them and said, hey, I would like to help out teaching the families. They might have a budgeting problem, teach them how to budget their money. So they said yes. And then after the first day, they're like, can we pay you? I'm like, no, you can't pay me. Yes, you can pay me.
Right, exactly.
So now I split my time with the business on one side and then Journey to Housing on the other side.
That's incredible. And I'm excited because I know I would have already done this when the podcast comes out, but no, Journey to Housing. And just to give a little, because this programming y'all do is so unique. I know could be another podcast episode, but give listeners, because I hadn't heard of it until you told me about it, but so thrilled to be working together. But what is Journey to Housing? How are you different?
So Journey to Housing is, like I said, a special work of St. Vincent de Paul, Detroit. And we operate in Western Wayne County. So like the I-275 kind of corridor plus Dearborn Heights. And the idea was to try to help what we call the hidden homeless. So these are folks that are couch surfing. They're in hotels, or a mixture. Sometimes they're in their vehicles and they're all working. But for one reason or another, they find themselves homeless. So these are not like street homeless, like you wouldn't even know that they were homeless. You might even have coworkers in this situation where you don't even know that they don't have, a permanent address, right? So the way that we're different, number two, is so there's not too many programs for the hidden homeless, maybe one other that I can think of. And then number two, how we're different is that we have the families really get at the root of why they're homeless, and finances have a huge part to do with that. So one of the things that we find is that their income is insufficient to support rental housing, especially how expensive it's gotten recently. So the first primary focus is working with them to increase their income, leverage their skills to get better paying jobs, because that's ultimately a huge piece of their problem. When rent approaches 40 or 50% of your take home pay, that becomes undoable if a kid gets sick. You get one kid sick and then another kid gets sick and then another kid, and you got to take off time from work. And so then it just becomes a snowball. So if the rent is a lower percentage of the income, we love for them to be at 25% of their take home pay for their housing. Then it becomes doable and they can save an emergency fund and that sort of thing. And that's where we met, because we have the financial coaching piece, but we need help on the income side, getting them into jobs that are better paid.
And it's incredible. And ever since you brought that term up of the hidden homelessness, I mean, looking back at other jobs I've had, I'm like, I feel like I've worked with a few and just didn't know it, and was a baby at the time and, in my teens or early 20s, and I don't know what to look for. But after that meeting, I had a little soul searching. I was like, this is crazy. But that's 50% of your work, we'll say. So
yes.
Now with Be Not Afraid, which I love the name. So how'd you come up with the name, and how do you take financial coaching as a different approach that you do?
Sure. So the name came from, I'm Roman Catholic, and I have, friends at church, Our Lady of Good Counsel. Shout out to Christine and her husband, Tom. They helped me come up with the logo. Again, why we need artists so much. And
yes.
I really loved, still love St. John Paul II. So he was a pope, and his opening address was just emphatically encouraging Christians to be not afraid. And I think oftentimes when it comes to finances, there is a ton of fear, and there's a ton of shame, and there's a ton of guilt. But you can't leave that behind unless you make some changes. So that's part one. And then part two, our current Pope, Pope Francis, one of his favorite devotions is Mary, untie her of knots. And there's a whole history behind what that is. But Mary is untying these financial knots that we've tied in our lives. And so Christine and Tom helped me just one night, I think it happened in one night, we came up with the name after I was thinking about it for a really long time. So yeah, I owe them that for sure.
Wow, that's a good one.
And then the second question, I can't remember what you asked. The second question, how am I different?
Yes, how your approach is different to financial coaching.
I think the major thing that most people are missing from how they handle their money is the habits that are behind it. So everybody kind of understands like, oh, I just need to spend less than I make. But putting that into action is very difficult. And then identifying the new habits that you need to implement to achieve a goal is kind of the next level. So I really work with clients to help them not only organize their finances and like have a plan, that's a huge layer, but then the second piece is implementing that plan. So a lot of people, they get the idea, okay, I can make a paper budget and, like write out everything that I have, but then the implementation can fall apart because XYZ comes up. So helping them get the habits to be able to make those decisions and just really giving them and having them give themselves a lot of grace and mercy to begin again, because it takes several months to get a budget to feel like it works.
That's incredible. Now, is there a certain niche of client, and I hate, it's a little cheesy to ask, but is there a certain group of clients you work with or certain niche of clients you help?
It seems like I tend to help single women who are extremely smart but they have spending. They feel like they overspend. So that seems to be one area I like to work. And then another area that I like to work is young professional married couples who are drowning in debt and having unexpected money fights. And that goes back to, of course, kind of marrying your opposite. So like my husband, like if you were to ask my husband how much money is enough for an emergency fund, the man literally would not be able to come up with a number. Like he just is like, no, it just, the more the better, Ken. There's no number. And I'm like, okay, can we be done with the emergency fund already?
Right.
And then that means a spender, and you need each other. You need a saver so that you have retirement in your life, right? And you need a spender so that the saver can have a little bit of fun, right? The division of labor. But the way I mostly help there with the young couples is helping that communication. So sometimes people get into these rules of, there'll be the budgeting nerd and they have all the Excel spreadsheets and they're keeping track of every penny. And they're like, where's that receipt from, Walmart? Or I saw on the credit card statement, you spent $67.23 at Walgreens. What did you buy at Walgreens that was $67? Well, our daughter's prescription,
Right.
So there never needs to be that kind of communication between a husband and a wife. So we work with so that they're both on the same page, and more importantly, that they're both pulling together. So what I find today is that often couples are living together before they get married. And when you're just living together and not married, it's totally acceptable. You pay your part, I pay my part, right? But when you get married and then have kids together, that doesn't really work anymore. So like one person has to take time off to, care for the kids when they're sick or, that sort of thing. So then all of a sudden it doesn't feel fair. The split that we decided on when we were in our 20s, now it doesn't seem to be working. And if there is some like money trauma in the past, like from parents or whatever, then the baby steps we take to working together as a couple are different depending on the couple, what their experience is. So we try to take baby steps towards working together, but that's the ultimate goal, is that we plan our money together and we pinky swear, spit shake, this is what we're going to spend this month. And if it goes over, we need to come back together and be like, hey, this is coming up. What are we going to do? Where are we going to pull this money from? So Those are my two favorites.
And I feel like too, especially with what you're doing. I mean, I know I don't like talking about finances. I've caused myself extra gray hairs and found a nice gray hair in my eyebrow the other day, which was super
That's awesome.
Right? Good thing I color them in so you can't see it. But, but I hate talking about finances. I mean, it's accounting season now, or tax season, I should say. And I'm like, every email or text I get from my account, I'm like, oh, what is it going to be? What did I do wrong? Like, I'm a failure as a business owner and me personally. So so much respect for what you do because it's so needed.
I have so much respect for what you do because I feel like some people just don't even know their value.
They don't.
I'm like, you do know, I see how much they're making. And I'm like, you do know that you are worth way more than this particular company is paying you, right? And that always shocks them because I see so many people's income numbers. So I can see like, oh, based on this and based on this, I'm like, yeah, you're not making enough and you deserve more. I can tell just by looking at you and talking to you. So that is always a fun conversation to kind of, and that's what I like to do the most, actually, is to inspire hope that they can turn the ship around.
Right. Oh, it's incredible. Now, as we wrap this up, what advice do you have for listeners?
So the advice I have for listeners is probably twofold. If you feel like your money is disorganized, then start taking some baby steps to getting it organized, because not only will it relieve the stress around personal finance, but more than likely, you'll be able to just bring it to work. You'll be able to be more present and probably enjoy work more. So the steps to do that are fairly simple. And if you need help, you can reach out. But I would start with awareness. So where is the money going now? All bank accounts have this nifty thing called, you can download the CSV file to Excel. And then if you know a few little things in Excel, you can sort that by first the vendor name. So you can categorize all the grocery stores as grocery, all the clothing stores as clothing. So once you see where you're spending money, then you can, number one, decide if you're spending more than what you bring in, which is step number one to realize. But then number two, identify the categories that people never overspend. So I would say 95% of people do not overspend groceries. I only see that happen once or twice. And it's where they're doing a lot of entertaining of family and friends. So if that's not you, whatever grocery number that says, that's what you should plan for the next month. And same with gas. Now, the smoothie bar that people go to every day, that may be the thing that you can cut back. So once you find out where the money is, then plan a paper budget using that information. And then the next step is to use some type of online system where it's in your pocket. So you know, oh, this is telling me I have this much left in groceries. And it is the 25th. Okay, I got 6 days left. I guess I'm making soup from what is in the refrigerator. You can make those kinds of decisions if you have something in your pocket telling you, here's how much you have left. So that's what I would give as advice.
That's great advice. You simplify it so much where it's not big and scary. Debt is not big and scary. You just simplify it so well. So if you're listening to this, you want to work with Kimberley, head to the show notes to work with her and check out everything she's got going on. A lot of good stuff. And tune in again next week for another episode of That's Business.